And so for a while, I just practiced it as this like nice physical practice. And then I had kind of one of those breakthrough moments where I was just going through some stuff personally, and I was in a hip opener, classic pigeon pose, and all of a sudden I just felt this huge emotional release that I think so many people that have come to yoga and found the yogic path, like we have that little breakthrough moment. It's usually in a hip opener or a heart opener. And I really thought to myself, wow, there's something to this that I didn't expect. And so that kind of started deep diving me more into what yoga was, which is really so much more than just the physical postures. It's really a path to liberation.
Welcome to the Conscious Leadership Podcast, where soulful entrepreneurship and holistic mind-body wellness meet to help you heal, discover your soul's purpose, and change the world. I'm your host, Gabby Ortega, entrepreneur, psychology expert, social media maven, and soulful leadership coach. And it's my mission to empower you into becoming the light leader you're meant to be. Each episode will be diving deep into topics that will help you gain personal mastery over your healing and mind-body wellness, while also giving you practical tips and tools to help you create, market, and scale a heart-centered business around your soul's purpose and life mission. Whether you're in the beginning of your self-awakening journey or a seasoned inner work god or goddess who's ready to step into their leadership as a soulpreneur, this is going to be your new favorite place to be. We know that you don't just want to feel happier and more fulfilled, but you want to deeply know yourself and powerfully step into your life's purpose while creating massive abundance around your mission. That's why I've created this podcast for you, the light leader of the next generation. Welcome home. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Leadership Podcast. I am thrilled because today we have someone who's not just a really good friend of mine, but also a fellow trauma survivor, fellow high-achieving female entrepreneur with an incredible business, an incredible methodology of healing trauma through yoga. Her name is Liz Arch. And like I said, she's a yoga teacher, martial artist, and author of an incredible book. She is a trauma alchemist, a mom, and the founder of the Primal Alchemy Method, and she uses mind-body practices to help people transform trauma into hope and healing healing and create healthy habits that stick. Oh my gosh, I can't say anything today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
And it's so funny because we actually live in the same apartment building, like just like in opposite ends. So I'm talking to you from maybe like 500 yards away.
I know, exactly. It's so funny.
Small world. So I know all about you, but my audience does not. So tell us about yourself, your journey, and what's brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. That's a big question, so I'll try to answer it as succinctly as possible, but we may go off on tangents. But basically, I have been through a lot of trauma in my life, as many of us have, starting at a very young age. One of my earliest traumas was surviving a flood when I was around 6 years old. And it was a very surreal experience for a little kind of 6-year-old nervous system. And basically the experience was it was New Year's Eve, and they woke me up kind of in a panic. We would sleep on the floor by my mom and dad's bed, and they woke us up just saying like, we have to get out now. And I remember they like carried me out, and once we got into the kitchen, I looked into the living room and all of our furniture was floating in like dark brown, muddy water. And then my dad had to put me on his shoulders and like wade out into the garage and put my sister and I. Yes, it was really intense.
That would absolutely traumatize me as a 6-year-old, 100%.
Yes.
Even as an adult, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, for me too, it's like so heartbreaking to see what's been going on in Texas recently. I'm seeing, people's roofs caving in and flooding and all the pipes bursting. So I do think that that's the one really beautiful thing about surviving trauma is it just creates such deep empathy for others who are going through it. But basically my dad had to put us on the roof of our car, and then we were rescued by a boat. and, whisked off. But what I learned from a very early age from that experience is that I wasn't safe in my own home. And I didn't have the language to verbalize that, or really kind of the emotional maturity to understand. But that one experience really deeply shaped my nervous system. And then just growing up, I was kind of on the periphery. My mom always used to say, our family put the fun in dysfunction.
I like that twist on it.
I know. We put the fun in dysfunction. So my mom and dad were amazing parents, but kind of on the periphery of our family tree, there was a lot of, substance abuse, domestic violence, mental health issues. And so I just kind of grew up kind of aware of it in the periphery, and just it really, for my on a nervous system level, it kind of just reinforced what I already felt of like, the world is not safe. So not only my home is not safe, but like the world is not safe. Yeah. And that translated then in my early 20s into an abusive relationship. And so it was incredibly physically, emotionally abusive, tore down my self-esteem. And I learned again that, I'm not safe in partnership. I'm not safe in my own home. And all of these experiences, I didn't have the understanding at the time of what trauma was. I didn't even know that the things I had been through were traumatic experiences. And so all of these feelings that I was feeling and patterns, and I would have a rage response one minute, and then I would be numb and dissociated the next minute.
Oh my God, I cannot relate more to this. I'm just listening to you are you talking about me?
Right? Yes. So then you just internalize it, and you start shaming yourself and blaming yourself. And especially when you're in, an abusive situation, there's an outside voice telling you how bad and unworthy and shameful you are, and it's all your fault. And so I didn't really have anything to point to, because I didn't understand that these were all inherently traumatic experiences. So my needle just pointed back at myself, and I was like, you're the problem. You're the problem. You're terrible.
Why do you find yourself in these situations where you constantly are trying to fight off bad people, and they're around you, and you're like, I don't know. It's it suddenly becomes is something broken with me? Am I attracting this kind of thing? Is this always how it's going to be as well? Kind of that feeling you don't know if it's ever going to end, if there is another possibility,
Yeah, absolutely. So my healing path really started when I found yoga. I had found yoga actually before the abusive relationship. So I don't, credit yoga solely for getting me out of an abusive relationship. When I first started practicing it, it was more of just from a physical perspective, from a physical standpoint. I was an athlete my whole life, and I was like, I like this because it actually challenges me in a different way. When I first, the first time I held a down dog, I was shaking and sweating, and I was like, this is hard.
It's so much harder than you think it is, guys. Those downward dogs make you shake and sweat the first time, for sure.
Yes. So it was so humbling. And so for a while, I just practiced it as this nice physical practice. And then I had kind of one of those breakthrough moments where I was just going through some stuff personally, and I was in a hip opener, classic pigeon pose, and all of a sudden I just felt this huge emotional release that I think so many people that have come to yoga and found the yogic path, we have that little breakthrough moment. It's usually in a hip opener or a heart opener. And I really thought to myself, wow, there's something to this that I didn't expect. And so that kind of started deep diving me more into what yoga was, which is really so much more than just the physical postures. It's really a path to liberation. And that led me to, one of the other limbs of yoga, which is meditation, which is really starting to find that freedom from suffering and being able to move intentionally into states of bliss. And so it kind of layered on top. So it started with yoga, and then I really added on mindfulness and meditation. And And really, once I saw how it was transforming me from the inside out, it was a practice that I knew I really wanted to share with others. So I started working one-on-one with domestic violence survivors to use trauma-informed yoga as a tool to really support and empower them to move from surviving into thriving. And then I kind of like, I'm a perpetual student. I always think, one of my teachers always says, like, always be a student of what you teach. So
yeah, I'm a big believer in that too.
Yes. Yeah. So most recently now I also teach TRE, which is somatic shaking. It's tension and trauma releasing exercises. And so combining that as well with yoga, with mindfulness, I'm also a breathwork teacher. So just pulling all of these different amazingly powerful healing modalities and then combining it into a titrated method to really walk people through step by step into their own healing potential and to really help people become allies with their own nervous system. I said that was going to be a short answer. That was a very long answer, but
no, that was perfect. That's everything that I literally was hoping you would tap on and mention. And I'm so excited because we actually have Liz coming out for our team retreat, and she's going to walk us through, I think, one of these TRE classes. And I am so excited to try something new that I haven't really experienced before. I do somatic shaking. I'm really familiar with, the concept and just doing it in my own way, but to actually be led and guided by someone who really knows what they're doing in a unique, different method is super, super awesome and cool. And I'm really happy that, I don't think even me going through my mental health training, trauma wasn't really something we talked about. We had one trauma class, and that's when it clicked for me that so many of the things that I was experiencing was trauma. It gave me that language and it gave me that definition. Because what you said before too is super important. Many of us don't know what constitutes trauma. And some people think it's a cognitive label that we are going to give something, but actually it's the way that our nervous system and bodies respond to a very emotionally distressing event and our inability to integrate that experience into both our psyche and our bodies in a way that's, healthy. And that is, our bodies and our brains are so much more sensitive than we think they are, right? I mean, at least that's how I feel.
Yeah, no, I think you hit on a really important point that it's not necessarily trauma is not necessarily the event itself or an experience itself, but it's how our nervous system interprets, orients, and organizes around a specific experience. Or, if it's complex trauma,
Over a
wide range of over a long period of time. So just even going back to the flood story, I was just maybe five or six at the time. And my sister's 3 years older than me. So how I experienced the flood is different than how my sister experienced the flood, is different than how my family, my dad experienced the flood. It was interesting. I was back home for Christmas a few years ago, and I was talking about it with one of she was my neighbor at the time. She went through the flood with us. She's a year older than me. She was 7. And we were just talking about how traumatic it was. And she was sharing her cats all ran under the house to escape the water and ended up drowning. And it was horrific for her and horrific for me. And my dad walked into the room and he was like, I didn't even think that was a traumatic experience. He's like, I just was like, okay, this happened and it sucks, but we move on,
Yeah. Yeah. And isn't that funny? And you're like, wait, don't you remember being
Dad?
But it's, our little itty bitty nervous systems when we're kids, that is so huge. And even, I talk to my clients about this as well. If we have wounding around attachments, or it's if our parents turn away from our bids for attention, for love enough, that can cause trauma for us. And they don't even notice, because to them, they were like, oh, I was working so hard to keep the family afloat. I was so busy trying to do this and that and the third. And then they're not seeing, oh, that could actually lead to for someone else when they're so little, it means so much more. Everything is so much bigger. And also the denial as adults of our own experience. The idea that too, when we get older, we really minimize a lot of things that may not be as light as we make them. We laugh, we joke about trauma a lot of times, and we'll say, oh my God, this funny thing happened to me. Let me tell you. And they'll go through their story. And at the end of it, I'm like, that sounds really horrible, actually. I don't know why you're laughing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just a way, what I'm so grateful for now is I really feel like the community that I'm surrounded with and kind of the younger generations that are growing up now, I think we have so many more tools than, maybe people like our parents' generation, because everything was kind of like, we don't talk about it. We just, we put on a brave face. And I love that we have this language now. It's to really be able to feel all of our feelings, to express, like, I'm raising my son differently than the way my parents raised me, than the way their parents raised them. And it's like really helping to unwind these transgenerational lines of trauma.
Dude, I think every cycle we're hopefully getting a little bit better.
A little better.
Just like incrementally. I do think though, with the advent of technology, with social media, with accessibility to information or access to information, that it's become a lot easier to have these conversations. I remember being a kid and my mom would tell me, don't tell people that you were bullied. Don't tell people that these things happen to you or that you have depression or that you're anxious, because they'll use that against you. They'll weaponize that. Or it makes you vulnerable. Or like, they're going to reject you. And even though she's a psychologist, she kind of was like, look, this is stuff that people don't openly talk about. Just because we talk about it at home and it's normal for us, people may look at this a different way. And it's really great that now we have not only language, but I think permission, especially younger generations, to treat their mental health as important as much as they do their physical health, and like, it's as important. It needs to take up as much time, as much care. And that, like, we're human beings and we need to give ourselves a little bit of grace when it comes to like our life experiences, and it's okay for everything to not be okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just to destigmatize it. My mom used to have a shirt that said, like, I'm not okay, you're not okay, and that's okay. So maybe she was already kind of there, but
ahead of her time. I'll take it.
Yeah. But it's definitely nice, like you said, to just be in this space where people are sharing more openly and vulnerably. I do think it's really important to have like a container of safety within your own body first before you share, because sometimes that can be really destabilizing. I know for me, like, I wanted to tell my story, my domestic violence journey. Like, it was such a deep pull inside of me to share it, but I had to kind of brace myself to be ready for it, because you can too also get attacked from multiple different, people that just don't understand. And so I think to just have the practice of yoga, breath work, mindfulness, all of these different grounding tools to really help to create self-regulation in our own bodies enables us to then really share openly. So it's not this like explosion when we do share.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's actually a great segue. I would love to know if you could share maybe with some of our audience members, if they have experienced trauma or they feel like they might have a traumatized body or nervous system. You mentioned yoga, somatic shaking. Like, what are some ways that you can start gently exploring safety in your body and start establishing that on a regular basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So I start with like the most simple, which is just feeling your feet on the floor, just really simple grounding practices, and taking the time to really tune into your own interoception. So really your own sense of self within your own body. And when we've been through trauma, it's very common to dissociate, to numb out, to go into either that fight, flight, or freeze response, and to almost leave our bodies, because that's what trauma does. It's actually, I know that you know this inside and out. But so what yoga does, and what more body-based methods do of trauma healing and releasing, is to bring you back into your body and to know that you can be safe with whatever sensations are there, and to tolerate it little by little. So one of the things I really love too about yoga is, even if it's just to hold one pose for 3 counts of breath, and just to know that this pose and these sensations have a beginning and an end. So to create almost a chronology, a timeline for yourself, because trauma fragments time and space for us. Things that happened in the past can feel like an ever-present danger. And so when we're really rooted in our body, saying a challenging yoga pose, you're there. And if if you give yourself, instead of just, when I teach classes, I really like to add a count And it might seem like regimented, but it really is to create this sense of there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you can kind of close that off for yourself. And it's not just this ever present danger, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's like that's kind of what happens too, like with the trauma cycles and the trauma loops, is that we have this open loop of trauma and that there is no kind of end until we, in our own kind of way and for our body and for our minds, kind of close that loop. And almost these tangential, metaphorical ways of doing this through yoga are very, because our brain works in symbols and metaphors, so that is very healing to have that complete cycle, knowing when it's going to begin, middle, and end. And kind of there is a finite time to experience this discomfort, and that you can survive and feel even better afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just start really simply, like feel your feet on the floor, notice the texture, notice, I do a lot of orienting practices before I even start moving on my yoga mat. I just take a moment to look around the room and just notice lights, colors, textures, plants, pets, people, like objects in the room. Notice where the windows and the doors are, just to create a sense of outward orientation, which can help me feel more internally safe, because now I've scanned my environment, which is what animals do in the wild, right? So we scan outwardly, so then we can find more centering internally.
I love that exercise, and something that's super simple, but if you like set a timer and give yourself 5 minutes to just do that, you're going to really significantly see a shift in how you feel in your body. And I know that because I've done this, and it's really funny. It feels almost like a whoosh, like suddenly you're just grounded and you're like here and you're rooted, and it's a really great feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's so many different, like, once I really get into yoga, there's so many different tools depending on like where you are, what your nervous system needs. Some people, it's like an inability to speak. Maybe they've been silenced or told to like sit down, shut up, stay small. So even just inviting your limbs to expand in a pose can feel really empowering, to let yourself kind of hold space and take up space. And then I also like to bring in some sounding practices into some of my yoga, which is maybe a little less traditional, but it's kind of inspired by my martial arts background. So I'll have people like, ha,
I love that. Really, but that's that release, right?
Yes. Yeah. So to really use your voice. So for me personally, it's just been such an empowering practice. And I love to share it with others, because I really feel like it's for everybody. It wasn't that way when I first started practicing. I was really kind of in like my ego space and not really, I was just practicing purely in a physical way. And that's the thing too, to share, is that you can practice yoga in a disembodied way, like so many different things. And we can also spiritually bypass in yoga. So there are ways to be really connected in your body in this practice. And then there's ways to use yoga to like disconnect and to be disembodied. So it's
a really good point. Yeah, I've seen, a lot of like trauma-informed yoga practitioners kind of pointing out that we really need to focus less on the asana, less on the kind of like fast, like exercise. Let's pump it out. Let's do these like chaturangas and like 105 per class, like. And kind of really focus on what the point of yoga is, which is that mind-body connection, that taking up space, that allowing yourself permission to be. I think one of the most healing things that happened for me in yoga was it doesn't have to be perfect. Which I was like, what? Yeah. I was like trying to hit these poses looking like the person in the yoga journal, with like the hands, limbs in the air and like going upside down and looking perfectly straight in my warrior two. And like, that's not the point, and it's like the point is actually to feel what feels good in your body, like what actually lines up for you, your version of those things. And also what I loved was like modifications. What? I had been like spin class, I'd been like lifting weights, like no one gave me modifications ever. And then when they were like, if you just want to be in child's pose today, that's okay. And I'm like, oh, Permission.
Yes.
Like that
Yes.
blew my mind that you could do this your own way and that you didn't have to do all the things to get the benefits. It was still beneficial to
Yes.
rest, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up. That permission, especially for someone that has been through any kind of, domestic violence or been in a coercive, abusive situation where it's your control is taken away, or it's all about power and control. Just having that permission and freedom within your body to actually say no to something is so empowering. And so that teaching from a trauma-informed lens has radically transformed my practice. I mean, I really apologize to like all the people that took my class for the first like 10 years. Because I was like, let's do handstands. And all I wanted to do was like handstands and arm balances and like make it the hardest class ever, because that's where my body was at. I was like, yeah, I want to go hard. But that was me again, like being actually disembodied, because I had to go so hard in order to feel. Yeah. Where now I can do just like the subtlest little pose. And I'm like, oh, I feel you. You're talking to me. My body's talking to me. And now I'm actually listening instead of pushing myself to the max edge. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
No, me too. And then that kind of nuanced approach of like having a conversation with your body, that was new to me too. And that's something yoga really unlocked, was like, oh, it's not just me up here in this conscious brain. There's inner child me, there's shadow me, there's, the different parts of me. And then there's my body, she is somebody who is working in tandem with my conscious mind. And we have to have those conversations and be in, like we said, the word is introceptive, or introception is really looking within, turning that attention and mindful focus within to kind of notice the inner workings of your body. And I think, and I'm not sure if this was in your class or someone else's at the studio that we were both at, but I remember someone going, okay, now feel your like organs. And I was like, yeah. What? They're like, feel your organs relaxing, feel your liver relaxing. I'm like, what? I've never even like paid attention to, I didn't know I could. And then I felt things moving and gurgling, and I'm like, oh my God, I can really pay attention to this.
Yes.
But our bodies are ancient, and we really don't, a lot of people don't know this. We pick up our information first in our bodies, always. It's what's ancient. It's the thing. It's a thing that's been working the longest for us to help us keep us safe. So our ability to intake information comes really mostly first through our bodies, and then our brains try to make sense of the bodily sensations. So if we're not actually connected to the sensations we're experiencing and able to kind of not get absorbed in them, but rather be able to take a step back and say, ooh, that's anxiety, or that feels like there's something happening there. I wonder what my body's trying to communicate. If we can't do that, we act impulsively, we numb, we do all these kinds of things. So really, yoga helped me find that window of tolerance that was so important for recognizing what was happening. First of all, learning what the language was for my body, what those different signals were telling me, and then being able to breathe through the space of the trigger, and then being able to make a conscious decision. And that was my healing. That was like, that's what it is, you know?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, you're a yoga spokesperson. Yes.
I don't know anything really about the mechanisms behind it, but I know that's what I felt. You know
amazing.
What I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you just absolutely nailed it. That's exactly the power that it has and what it holds in terms of healing for me. So one of the other things with my traumas, I was diagnosed with panic disorder and agoraphobia. And that for me is I really started to fear my own sensations. So if I would start to feel my heart racing, I was like, oh shit, I'm going to have a panic attack. Like, and so just the beating of my heart would trigger me into this full fight or flight response. And I would go into panic and then ultimately shut down. And what yoga really helped me to do was exactly what you just shared, was to be able to create this window of tolerance to say, okay, I can start to feel my heartbeat, but I can know that my heartbeat elevating, I can take the story out of it. Because for me, I was like, heartbeat elevating, panic attack, die. I'm going to die.
And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes. And instead I'm like, okay, heartbeat elevating, I'm working hard to hold this pose, and I'm only going to be in this pose for 5 breaths. And then my heart rate's going to go back down. So my heart rate, it's not going to trigger me into panic. I can start to tolerate this. It's like really, again, that titrated model that, Peter Levine, who I love, talks about, of just this idea of like titration, like really slow. We have 2 chemical solutions. And if you just pour one solution into the other, it'll explode. And instead, if you just take a little dropper and like drip, 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 you can actually transform and alchemize this solution into something else without the big explosion. So that's really the approach now I take to my physical practice, is to just go slow.
Yeah.
Expand the window of tolerance.
Just go like baby steps and just keep pushing slightly, like more, expand a little bit more every time.
Yes.
And then go back when it feels like too much, and then try again. And that permission again to just like let each step be enough. Let where you are be good enough. Like if you go back, that's fine. If you go forward, wonderful. And just taking all that pressure off of like expectations of how it should look or how it should feel or what should happen, and just allowing it to unfold. And I think having a teacher like you who's really safe is so huge. Like I felt always so safe and held in your classes, and I always look forward to them because it was different than other people's classes. I think you can tell when someone is trauma informed and someone is more just like going for the exercises or just going for the poses or things like that. And I just really, truly am very thankful for you and everything that you're doing.
Thank you. Yes, I'm grateful for you too. I mean, it's just been so inspiring to see everything that you're doing in the world. And I always tell my boyfriend, I'm like, Gabby's rocking it. Like, look at her. I'm like, she's just down the hall and she's crushing it. Like,
it's because you and I are practicing that titration, guys. If you have trauma, I totally recommend finding a trauma-informed yoga practitioner, taking one of Liz's classes, exploring what that is, because it's very different than the exercise yoga that you see. And I think for me, I was very turned off by that in the beginning because it felt very overwhelming. And all of a sudden I felt like I was in like a competitive space with people who are much better than me. And then there was judgment. And then all my inner critics started to come out. It was like not good for my trauma. So I was wondering if you have any questions or any suggestions for people looking for, like, how do we find out if someone's a good option for like a trauma-informed yoga class? I know yin yoga is really gentle and that might be a good option. Like what are some ways, if you're looking for a teacher or an instructor, you can kind of suss out if it's going to be kind of that kind of a class?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think it's just absolutely okay to reach out to vet the teacher on your own terms, to ask questions that are unique to you and your situation, and just share what you might be feeling uneasy about or perhaps, insecure about. And whenever someone approaches me in that way, I do absolutely whatever I can to, help them feel at ease that this is the right space for them. And some people too, it might not be the right space. And then if it's a good teacher, hopefully they'll recommend someone that would be a better fit, So sometimes people come to me specifically wanting to work through, pregnancy. They're doing pregnancy. And even though I was pregnant and I have a son and I did yoga through my pregnancy, like I don't specialize in prenatal, postnatal yoga. So I'll send that person to someone else. So I just think it's empower yourself with giving yourself the permission to ask questions, and whoever you reach out to, you'll be able to learn a lot by how they respond.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I didn't even know like that you could do that. Like makes total sense though. Like just ask and, see if they're open to talking about it. Yeah.
And you could it could just be a super simple email before the class. Like, hey, I'm interested in trying your class, but these are kind of the things that I'm working through. Is this the right fit for me? It doesn't have to, it's not like you're asking for free labor. It's just more of like, is this the right fit for me?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious to know, and it's cool if you don't want to share this, but I'm very curious because I met Devin before I really went through my trauma healing journey. And it was a messy experience in the
Mhm.
relationship, navigating, then also recognizing he had trauma and he had mental health stuff going on. He had his depression
Yeah.
and things that where he was dealing with. And I know you have stuff, your partner is going through some stuff or has gone through. So do you have any reflections or advice, if you're in a relationship and you're kind of going through your healing journey, how you've approached it, how you as a couple approach it, so that you can kind of get
Yeah.
through it?
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question. So I think that first and foremost, you have to do the work within yourself. I think where most relationships kind of start to have difficulties, and I'm by no means a relationship expert, let me just say that right up front, but is when we try to change the other person before we do the work on ourselves. And so
Yeah.
for me, with my partner, my boyfriend's name is Adam, and he's the father of my son. But when
They're
I was
so cute, you guys,
pregnant,
by the way. I literally run into Adam and her son like at the park, and they're like running around screaming and playing, and I'm like, man, that's such a fun dad.
oh, he's the best. He's the best dad. And it's been so amazing to see his transformation. But while I was pregnant, so we didn't know each other for very long before I got pregnant. And it was kind of like an oh shit moment for me, honestly. I mean, I'm so grateful for my son. He's the light of my life, but I wasn't expecting to, it was unplanned. I will just say that. And we were still getting to know each other as humans, and we were still coming with our own, various traumas and baggage too, because that's the thing, is like healing is not linear, and there's always new things that come up in life. So it's just being able to really ground ourselves in the tools, and it's a work in progress constantly, a work in growth constantly. Yeah. And so he actually went into a major depression and had a psychotic break while I was pregnant. And so I, with the coordination of his family, got him to actually go home to his family in Ohio, where he was then hospitalized there because I couldn't, he didn't have a support system here outside of really me. And so he was absent for the majority of my pregnancy. And so that was really challenging for me, because I was like, now every day in the mirror, I'd wake up and I'd look at myself and I'm like, you got this, Liz, single mom, you can do this, you're empowered, you're resilient. But I had completely planned to be a single mom. And he, with medication, and he was really rooted in meditation before. And so I also want to destigmatize medication. Some people are like, meditate, don't medicate. It's like, you can meditate and medicate. It's okay.
Yes, there, guys, room for both. I always am like, and let's add more ands into things.
Yes. Yeah. So the medication actually really helped pull him out of it. And then just the support of his family. And I just always saw at his core that he's a kind, gentle human being. Like, he was nothing like any, abusive partner I've had in the past. Like, his soul, his spirit was just kind. And that's always what I saw. And we had a big healing, and it took a lot of forgiveness work on my part. I had to forgive myself. I had to forgive him. He had to do the same. And there was a lot of unknowns, but I wasn't even sure if I wanted him at the birth, but he made it back in time for my son's birth. And I don't typically recommend you have a child if you're as a way to heal your mental health issues. But in our case, our son was miraculous for him. It was like sink or swim. It was like, I'm going to step into the role of being an incredible dad or I'm not. And he stepped up big time. And so we just constantly push each other to grow and push each other to bring out the best versions of ourselves. And that's what I really love and appreciate about him, is that we're able to do that together. And sometimes it's, harder to navigate, but we're just growing together. So I think as long as whoever you're partnered with is committed to growing alongside of you, then you have a beautiful path ahead of you. If you are with a partner that is unwilling to grow and to look at their own stuff, then maybe it's time to find a new partner.
I could not agree more. Oh, Like, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things we don't hear about are men's mental health struggles. I don't
Yes.
like to talk about Devin's story because that's his story to tell, but he also fell into a very severe depression during our relationship. And we didn't get to the point of hospitalization, but we were very, very close. And, it's very scary. And I can't imagine going through that while also going through a pregnancy that kind of wasn't expected and not having like a huge support system around. But it's so beautiful in that, your sentiments of that we're both growing and it's always about like growing together. And, you are partners. Like, I love that word partners versus like husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, or
Mhm.
girlfriend, or whatever kind of like gendered
Yeah.
pairing. Partner is really embodies what you really are looking for, which is a teammate, right? And like a
Yeah.
teammate that can hold space for you when you need it, and you can hold space for them when they need it. And it's not going to be pretty all the time, and it's not going to be perfect, and
Yes.
it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to be painful sometimes. But it's the idea that you're both trying and you're both really showing up for what you need to do for yourselves so that you can
Yeah.
show up for the relationship. Because so many times I have people reach out and go, Gabby, can you help me and my partner? Can you do like couples stuff? I'm not an expert in that, and I do not want to do couples work, just not my thing. But
Yeah.
I ask them, are you guys going to individual support? Are you guys working on yourselves individually? Because nothing's going to happen for your relationship in a relationship coaching scenario or therapy scenario if neither of you are actually working on your individual things, because it's not our partner's responsibility to heal us. I think we also treat our partners like our therapists, and like that can disintegrate
Yes.
a relationship very, very fast. It's a difference between like a partner holding space and a partner then becoming your entire like therapy, processing individual. That's exhausting. And like your partner's going to be
Yeah.
resentful, after a while.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You're so on point with all of it. I think it's interesting, like just to see the growth that, and I share his story too. I'm so glad you said that too, that it's, Devin's story is not yours to share. So I share it because he's shared it now publicly. And he's using his story to help men. And so he's, creating a new business called Conscious Dads, where it's really like,
oh my God, really? Yes. I'm looking for
yeah.
conscious male coaches and like people to refer to. So this is good. I'm writing this down.
Yeah. So he shares his mental health journey just with other dads because and other men too, because there's such a stigma around it. And I feel like men have less support and resources and tools than women do.
Yeah.
And so
So much
it's been really
conditioning and
beautiful.
so much
So much
stuff,
conditioning
around
and
being a man,
shame. And
not
it's just,
shame.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I really do
So
think that like
yeah.
so much of our and this is a totally different subject, but so much of like the stuff that we're seeing in male aggression or statistically the way they harm or use violence more than women, I think it's because they don't have space to express their feelings. They're not
Yeah.
given, no one's given a language. They're told they have to bottle it up. And at a certain point, psychologically, it all comes out, you know what I mean? And you can only push it down for so long. And having, someone like Adam to kind of lead the way and say, okay, we're going to like come up with a way of dealing with this that's going to be better. It's going to feel better. We're going to have better lives. Things are going to be happier and we can be a full human being is
Yeah.
so crucial to changing. I think the structure of like cis men, I should say,
Yeah.
in this society. And so I love that. I love that so much. And so you both are really diving into like business after healing and also like entering and being in the healing space as the healers, which I think is awesome. So cool.
Yeah. I mean, for me, my biggest drive in this world, what really lights me up is just to help people tap into their own self-healer. Like my biggest win is when you don't need me anymore,
I saw that too. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I love it because it's like we all have the capacity innately within us to heal. And yes, we need support, like as Stephen Porges and polyvagal theory, as he talks about in terms of like the social engagement system, like the social engagement system is really important. We need connection. We heal in relationship to others. But I totally just lost what I was even thinking about or saying.
That's all
like
you
my brain
needed
just
to say. Like we heal in the context of relationship with others. And to be quite honest, like that's something I was literally talking about multiple times this week with my coaching clients who are opening healing businesses. Is that one of the things I want them to keep telling people and remind people is that we can only take our healing journey on our own in a bubble to a certain point, and
Yeah.
then we have to get support from other people. We have to find a guide who's maybe walked this path before to give us some help or support. But
Yeah.
I say arm yourself with a team. Like arm
Exactly.
yourself with
Yeah.
a freaking team. If you are recovering from trauma, even if it's childhood trauma from a long time ago, maybe it's not recent major trauma, but it's like I'm finally realizing that I have major, for me, rejection issues from my time being bullied and really like a lot of social
Yeah.
anxiety from that. Even if you're just like kind of working from the scar, not the open wound, still surround
Yeah.
yourself with a team of people who love you,
Yes.
support you, experts, therapists, coaches. If you can't afford anybody, there's free workshops. There's lots of stuff on
Yeah.
Instagram, free resources. I host a community call every other week. Come on down, tell us how your mental health is.
Amazing.
Like yeah, like
Yeah.
find a space, but find a space and get there and start to really really surround yourself with like people who are going to uplift your healing, because that is such a
Yes.
catalyst. I can't, like, for me, it was a huge catalyst to really getting where I wanted to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So that's why it's so incredible the work that you're doing to really help people work through their trauma, but also just make these beautiful businesses and create a thriving life for themselves financially, spiritually, emotionally, physically, all of the things. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
that totally brought me back full circle too. I was like, how did I even, what tangent was I going on? But like you said, to really empower people to be their own greatest healers. But the way that we do that is also in connection with others. So
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Oh, this has been such a good conversation. I'm so glad we got to have it. I'm trying to think of like maybe one last thing to ask before we kind of wrap up. I like to keep these at an hour because usually I feel
Yeah.
like that's how long people tune in.
Attention
But
span.
right, attention span. I also take my podcast on my walks, and my walks are around an hour, so I'm selfishly making them
Yes.
as long as my walks are. Um,
Perfect.
so I guess maybe a final question would be like, do you have any, from your perspective, your experience, your knowledge of yoga and trauma healing and all of those things? Do you have anything you'd like to leave our audience with? It's really some wonderful women, some men, and they're all really on their own healing journey. So anything, any tips or any advice?
I just really feel like keep going, and healing is our birthright. For me, what's really carried me through is just hope, and the hope that whatever challenge I might be facing right now, I can move through it. And just to really learn how to befriend your body. And that doesn't mean that you have to love what's going on in every moment, but really listen, because our body speaks to us all the time, but we are so quick to kind of numb it, like, oh, I have a headache, let me take some aspirin. And your headache is telling you something, something else is off. Maybe your headache was telling you haven't hydrated enough today, like I need more water. So our body speaks to us all the time. So just listen, like just start to listen, change your relationship to your body, and everything really starts to transform.
Oh, that's so yummy. Thank you so much. That like I feel like that fed my heart.
Oh, yes.
And so if we want to know more about you, if we want to read your book, because she has a book, y'all, read it. Where can we find you? How can we get more of Liz?
Yeah, sure. So my website is lizarch.com, and I'm going to be opening the doors for my Primal Alchemy Method mentorship program in May. And so that's going to just be really leading people,
Oh my
in
God,
a
yes.
supportive group setting. Yes. So just leading people through a healing journey to really befriend your nervous system, to become allies with your nervous system, to really start to feel. So for anyone that's been numb, that's my dog shaking. I don't know if you could hear her in the background. She has
Dogs
a very
are always welcome.
dogs are amazing. So she actually, my little dog, she shakes with me when I do somatic shaking TRE.
What?
She'll like lay on my belly, and she just will go to sleep because my whole body is like trembling, and she's like, It's like a little massage chair for her. But yes, you can find me at lizarch.com and just on Instagram at lizarch.
And remind us one more time the name of your book.
Oh, it's The Courage to Rise.
The Courage to Rise.
And you can find it on Amazon.
I have it in my on my table with a bunch of books that I'm so excited to read. So I'm really, really thrilled that you wrote about your journey and shared your insight. And you guys, like, she is just the loveliest human being on earth. I have been taking yoga with her for a while. Unfortunately, with COVID, we've been like stuck at, at home. But no, it's
our pool's open now. Let's go meet at the pool.
Open. Yeah, let's go meet at the pool.
Let's go meet at the pool.
She's a fantastic resource and a really safe individual. So just ask her questions. Go take her course, and you will not regret it. But thank you so much. We'll drop all your info in the show notes for everybody in the audience. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure and an honor.
All right. Till next time. And that's our episode for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining us at the Conscious Leadership Podcast. I'm so excited. This next year, 2021, is going to be huge. We have so many guests that are coming on that you are going to love. I'm going to be doing some more solo casts and Om Therapy coaching. We have so many things rolling out for you. Retreats, another round of Ignite starting in May, another one starting at the end of the summer, a mastermind, and so many other things. So be sure to stay tuned with us on Instagram. Follow me at om_therapy_coaching and stay tuned for so much goodness coming up. As always, I would love to hear your feedback. Head over to iTunes and leave us a review, and I would love to give you a free copy of my subconscious reprogramming workbook, and that is absolutely free. Just send me a screenshot of your review and on Instagram, and I will be so happy to send that over as my gift for you. And I am sending you so many hugs, so much love, and I hope that this week you are able to find just a little bit more joy in your life. Have a good one, guys.